Howie Roseman, GM of the Eagles. The Philadelphia Eagles put out almost like a 20-minute video. I thought it was pretty cool of showing what was going inside their war room. I don't know if they call it war room. That's what they call it in Owings Mills, but their draft room. And what they showed in the first round is that Howie was frantically trying to trade up in the first round. He called several GMs, Bobby, several GMs, including Eric DeCosta. And every time he got turned down, the frustration in the room was more and more palpable. And so I just thought this was very interesting. His conversation, you can't hear Eric on the other end. We have everything Howie's doing, and you can see how frustrated he is with his boss sitting right next to him in is it Jeffrey Lurie, right? Jeffrey Lurie is their owner.
Correct.
So let's go inside their war room.
Hey, buddy. Any interest in moving back? Do you want stuff this year, or would you look at next year? Yep. Walking in here. Okay. Elevator music.
That's mad.
Say it's got something better. Come on.
Nobody wants to trade down.
Well,
Like
everyone's saying they are trading down, but nobody is trading down. I don't know what to tell you, Jeffrey. I'm trying.
I know.
I'm trying. I'm trying. And I'm trying. And one more thing. I'm trying.
Boy, what a tough seat to sit in when your owner's to your left and he's staring at you and you're staring back at him with no answers because Eric DeCosta is standing 10 toes down on the other line, on the other side of that phone call, isn't he?
Oh, why'd you have to say 10 toes down? I was enjoying this segment until you brought that in.
You already know. Trigger phrase, entered in any chance I get. That's an awesome behind the scenes look right there.
So cool. And I'm glad that Philadelphia put it out there. I mean, Howie was being stonewalled, okay? He was stonewalled by Eric. He was stonewalled by others. But I want to make this clear. If you watch the full video, it seems clear to me that he was not trying to trade up to get Malachi Starks. And the reason why I say that is because he tried to trade up before the Ravens, he tried to trade with the Ravens, and then he tried 2 or 3 times after the Ravens. So if it was Malachi Starks and he was gone, I think he would have stopped trying to trade up. That's my guess. And on top of it, once they did make their pick, they ended up getting a trade, but it was one spot up. They got all the way up to 31 from number 32. And they took inside linebacker Jihad Campbell. And once they did, he had this big sigh of relief, and his owner comes over and he's like, "Hey, staying patient worked. We got our guy in the end." And he goes, "Yeah, well, we were kind of forced to stay patient." Like, clearly in that clip, we see that he was not being patient. He talking about how much he's waiting. Somebody had elevator music. I don't know. It was right after. I don't know if it was with Eric or right after Eric's call or whatnot, but I thought it was absolutely hilarious that somebody put him on hold and gave him an elevator. You're the GM of the Philadelphia Eagles, just won a Super Bowl. You're proposing a trade up, and whoever was on the other end put you on hold and gave you elevator music. So I honestly do think in the end, they got their man, but it was still hilarious to see Eric and others just be like, "Nah, we're not helping out the Super Bowl champs. We're good."
Nick Sirianni referred to that music as maddening.
Maddening.
You listen to that long enough, it becomes maddening. It starts to brainwash you.
Yeah.
It starts to drive you crazy.
Yes. And by the way, Jeff Zrebiec had watched that video, and he had tweeted somewhere over the weekend that he thinks that if Malachi Starks wasn't there, he thinks that the Ravens would have traded back. So even though the Eagles weren't trying to move up to get Malachi, yeah, I think it's pretty clear. And Eric had said that he had gotten phone calls. He said plural. So I don't know that, Howie was the only guy that called him. But Eric wanted Malachi. And I do think that says a lot, Bobby, because there is another clip. There was 2 clips that we never really got to when Eric DeCosta was on the Lounge, the podcast for the Ravens team website. Yeah, there it is with Jeff. He says, good chance Ravens would have traded back with Eagles if Starks wasn't there. They didn't want to move off of him, though. They wanted Malachi. They wanted him. And as much as Eric likes extra picks, Bobby, he was not willing to lose Malachi for extra picks. Now, back to this idea with how much he loves extra picks. When he was on the Lounge, Eric DeCosta, he was asked, you had 11 picks. You already admitted before the draft that probably all 11 won't make the team. So why not trade up? Like, why not trade up? And Eric basically laid out his draft philosophy. And I think people in Baltimore hate it because they want to see Eric DeCosta trade up more for people that they like. But this clip went viral outside of Baltimore. I saw so many other team reporters being like, Eric gets it. Eric gets it. Eric knows how to do the draft, this and that. So maybe it's one of those classic things where it's like the grass is always greener on the other side. But here he is outlining why he wants as many picks as humanly possible.
There was really, for me, an important study called The Loser's Curse by Richard Thaler, economist, and Cade Massey, a professor at Penn now. And the idea of it basically is that teams simply don't do any better drafting than anyone else. You're all going to be about the same. And basically that the draft is inherently sort of a luck-driven process. Now, I don't believe that, but there is an element of luck involved. So if you think about that and if you accept that premise, then you're trading up for a player that you think is better than anyone else, right? And you think that team's going to draft him.
Right.
But most of the time, they're not going to draft that player. And so what we've seen over the years is that player is probably going to fall to you. Could he be selected? Yes, but there's no guarantees that that player is going to be better than the player that you end up getting.
Yeah.
So they call it the loser's curse because the team at the top, it's like, oh, he's got the first pick in the draft. Well, you know what? The player that they select, we've seen this many times. There's no guarantees that that player is going to be better than the player that gets selected at 25 or 30 in the first round. All things being equal, right? The fact that no one really knows who's going to be better than anyone else, the only rational approach is to get more at-bats,
right? Is
to pick more. But for me, the idea of having more picks means I have the chance of getting more players. If I have the chance of getting more players, then I have a better chance of finding more players that can play than my opponents.
So did you get that, Bobby, of why it's called a loser's curse?
I just don't know how anybody would take issue with that. If you can take your emotions out of it with the players that you're targeting, the players that you've been studying, and you realize how important at-bats are, swings are, I don't know how you could be mad at that.
Especially in the later rounds where it's just like it's like a lottery ticket. Like we know the percentages. He laid it out. In the 4th round, you have about a 20 to 25% chance of finding a contributor in the 4th round. In the 6th round, you have about 12% chance of finding a contributor in the 6th round. And so when you have just a 10 to 12% chance, like, why not get more lottery tickets? That's basically, now in the 1st round, you kind of want to get it right more often. Like the chances obviously go up. But I loved what he said. He explained why the book was called Loser's Curse. And this is an economist. This is people that are not in the draft. They're just looking at things through data outside the draft, outside looking in. And basically what they found through the data is it's a curse to be a loser because A, you're a loser. And B, being at the top, he's saying, isn't guaranteed to have a better player than he said, like, say, number 30. And how many times have we seen the Browns, who are consistently in the top 10, just flush away these top 10 picks, just time after time after time. Whereas the Ravens, whether it was Ozzie or Eric, nail it in the late 20s or early 30s, just time and time and time again. And so that's why he's saying there's no guarantee if I do move up that the guy I thought was great would have ended up being great. And the guy that would have fallen to me would have been way worse. Meanwhile, I'm trading away other lottery tickets that I could be having in the later rounds. So as much as he loves those lottery tickets, though, he believed in Malachi Starks enough that he would not move back with Howie Roseman. All right, one last topic on this Eric DeCosta. Bobby, we didn't have time to get into this, but I find this fascinating. So on day 3, when everything finished up, Eric DeCosta had mentioned that they were considering drafting a quarterback on day 3. So Garrett Downing is like, you know what? I'm going to follow up on this. Let me see if I can get a name. I mean, Eric DeCosta seems to be in a sharing mood now that the draft is over. Let's see if we can get a name out of him. He didn't give a name, but he did give a challenge, and we are accepting this challenge. Let's see what he challenged us to do.
Liked, of course, a couple of quarterbacks went in the division. Shedeur Sanders went to the Browns. Will Howard went to the Steelers on day 3. I'm curious, are you willing to share who you were thinking about drafting at quarterback as a backup on day 3?
I mean, I think there was a couple guys we liked. One guy in particular that we liked on day 3. I mean, you could go back and you could look at it and see all those guys that were drafted on day 3, and then, try to figure it out. But there was definitely one guy that we thought was kind of interesting as a day 3 pick, and we talked about it, and he got picked. But
okay, Bobby Trossett. He said they would have picked a quarterback on day 3, which could be rounds 4 through 7. Okay. But he had been picked when they were considering him. He said, you can go look at the day 3 quarterbacks and try to figure this out. So I went to NFL.com and I filtered to quarterbacks, and I got all the day 3 quarterbacks. What is that? What are you doing over there? What's that body language? Why are you laughing?
It cracks me up how willing you were to go deep dive. I'm following along. I'm curious to hear your prediction.
You don't want to know? I want to know I want you to, let's do this together. Okay. First of all, he's saying they would have done it, but he was picked. Do you agree we could take out the 7th rounders? Like if he wanted a quarterback, he could have used one of his many 6th rounders, correct?
Take the 7th out. Yep.
Take 7th out. Okay. Now, that leaves one round 5 pick, which is Shedeur Sanders, the Browns. And then they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rounders that were picked. I have a hard time thinking that it was one of the later 6 rounders because they had a gazillion 6-round picks. And so, like, if you wanted a guy, you would have been fine expending a 6-rounder, right? And so if it was a 6-rounder, I have to believe it would have been in the range of Kyle McCord, that was the 5th pick in the 6th round, or the 9th pick in the 6th round. To me, I'm taking out those other 6-rounders. What about you?
I probably would go with Will Howard.
Will Howard, I think, is definitely a possibility.
That's probably, if I'm looking at this list and I'm considering the fact of the 6th round and the positioning and what Eric said and sort of who they've shown interest in when it comes to backups in recent seasons, not only with just the signing of Cooper Rush, but there was some interest, wasn't there, about Baker Mayfield several years ago before he landed in Tampa. Maybe there, I don't know if interest is the right word on Tannehill, but there was at least discussions within the fan base on Tannehill. I'll go Will Howard out of Ohio State, championship winner.
I'm fine with that pick. I think that would be number 2 on my list. You know who my number 1 is. You know who I think it was. You're going
Shedeur?
I'm going Shedeur.
Oh man.
And maybe it's partly because I wanted them to pick Shedeur. Once he started falling, again, I was out of pocket. I was off doing birthday and baptism stuff on Saturday. But I remember I said to you Friday night, even when it was through day 2, when he was falling on day 2, I was like, shoot, the Ravens should draft him, because I'm always concerned about the Ravens backup and what they could do if Lamar Jackson were to go down. Knock on wood, he's been healthy the last 2 years. Let's keep it that way. I would have loved Shedeur because, number 1, I think what other teams were nervous about or potentially nervous about with his dad, I don't think the Ravens needed to be nervous about, because they know Dion, and Dion has such a tremendous respect for Ozzie Newsome and the Ravens organization that I don't think he would have tried to come in and run over anybody. I don't think he would do that to any team, quite frankly, like run over them, but I really don't think he would have done that to the Ravens. And I think that with having Lamar Jackson being the top quarterback, it would have been less of a circus, because so like for the Browns, obviously there's going to be clamoring for him to win the number 1 spot, the starting role. And if anybody even stumbles for a second, there's going to be calls to put Shedeur in. Whereas in Baltimore, Lamar Jackson, there's no questioning. He's the number 1 guy. The only way Shedeur would be getting in is if there's an injury. And then he'd have to beat out Cooper Rush. But like, he could have been a long-term potential answer. And I think he for sure could have beat out Devin Leary, right? Later in the clip, Eric DeCosta expressed that they do still have confidence in Devin Leary, but not enough to say, hey, we're not going to pick a day 3 guy. So I'm not ruling out Will Howard, but I'm definitely not ruling out Shedeur Sanders. I think he would have been a great pick in Baltimore. I would have loved having him here.
I think it would have been a disaster.
Ah!
I think it would have been disastrous. The one issue with the scenario that I have that you just outlined is that Shedeur wants to play right away. Shedeur does want that Cleveland situation. Maybe he didn't want that team. Maybe he didn't want all these quarterbacks in that room, but he wants to play right away.
For sure he does. Every quarterback does.
Absolutely.
But
so
he's
while
got no room to talk when you have the MVP, a 2-time MVP ahead of you.
Precisely. It'd still be a distraction. But I'm talking about from his perspective, Sarah. Why would he want to come to Baltimore?
Doesn't matter. It was a draft. He was falling.
Well, guess what, though? Deion Sanders, absolutely, whether you like it or not, was controlling the narrative in terms of where he went throughout the
Deion Sanders would not have been like, you're not going to the Ravens. We're forget this. You're not playing for a year.
Just saying. He had a great influence on a lot of that throughout the pre-draft process, and he made major headlines well before the pre-draft process even started in terms of where he wants his sons to go and not go.
Even if I granted you that, because I do think you put a little bit more emphasis on that than needed, although I do think there was some influence for sure. I do think that maybe you're playing it up, but that's my opinion. Even if I granted you that, do you see how I'm laying it out, how it's different for Baltimore?
Yes, of course.
Okay.
Of course. Is it less of a distraction there because nobody's calling for Lamar's job? Yes.
And the respect he has for Ozzie and the organization, Dion.
But I just think it would be unnecessary. You know what? Something Nuno Alves in our chat, and now because everybody's commenting on it, I lost it. There's a lot of different comments in there. Nuno just said something really interesting. Do you think Eric DeCosta is lying about this too?
Well, I mean, there's always that possibility. I mean, he said it the night of the draft, and then he reiterated it again. I'll say this. When Eric DeCosta lies, it's usually for a reason. What would be the reason to pretend that you were thinking of drafting a quarterback when you're what message did that send to your quarterbacks that's currently on the roster? I think there's only a downside to admitting that. What's the benefit of lying in this situation?
Just throwing it out there as a hypothetical.
Well, but do you think he was lying?
Well, I can't think of a positive, so
right,
I can't confidently say that he is.
Right.
But I've also been really confused in the past with Eric, most recently with the analytical lie that he gave, where I was kind of scratching my head. What the heck did they move around with the 4th and the 5th or the 5th and the 6th or whatever the heck it was? Oh, no, he just made it up.
But you see the benefit to that lie, at least.
Yes.
Yeah. That he's covering himself with a weird trade.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. One last question for you before we move on. You think it would have been a disaster. I think it would have been glorious. Okay. But
yeah, for the record, I'm going Will Howard.
But real quick, do you think, even though you think it would have been a disaster, do you think they were considering Shedeur? Do you think that's a possibility? Like I'm saying Will Howard is a possibility?
No.
You don't even think it's a possibility?
No, I don't. No, I don't think.
Oh
I don't think should. No.
You're crazy. I need to know the answer to this. I need to know the answer to this.
How much deeper are you going to dig?
I don't know. Maybe I can email EDC. Just keep it
I can tell you really want to find a way to dig.
Maybe he'll like feel more at ease of saying it in like 10 years. Maybe in 10 years, like if we ever get an interview, I'll be like, hey, I just need to go back 10 years. maybe 5
And
years.
we should keep a Google Doc of things that need to be addressed that can be easily forgotten.
That's right. We do. We do.
It's good stuff, though. Chat,
Yeah.
where you at? Which quarterback was he referring to? If he indeed was telling the truth, which quarterback? I've seen a lot of comments. Good exercise.